Yeah, chat. Flow chart, teacher. Flow chart. Okay, good evening. I'm alright. I think we can proceed. I can see that not many people have connected. However, class has to move on as this something that we had agreed upon last night. So we are just going to have a class for about 25 to 40 minutes, then we'll be done. So we'll be looking at the indicators and I'll dive in deep to show you how you can go about analyzing pure qualitative data. Exactly. So most of these frameworks that we've been talking about, mostly what you are going to be putting there, they are indicators mostly because you want to be keep on tracking those indicators. So an indicator is a statistical value providing an indication of the condition. So when you have an indicator which should be able to speak to you, it will tell you the condition and the direction. Are you moving in the right direction or are you moving in the wrong direction? Once you discover that at the point where we are, looking at the indicator that we have, looking at the values that we have, the indicator is telling us that we are not moving at the right pace, then it means we have to make refinements to our activities so that we can up our games and ensure that we are always meeting our targets timely. So that's all about an indicator. An indicator is something that you should be able to measure. And when you come up with an indicator, you must clearly specify, like we noticed last night from the logical framework. Once you put in an indicator, you are also going to show where you are going to be getting that information for you to be able to compute an indicator. And I did say that in an event that you do not have a capacity as an institution to develop a fully working monitoring and evaluation system, it means you can just be tracking and be reporting on indicators, and mostly it should be, those indicators those indicators that may oh, sorry, let me just, I've just noticed that I'm not presenting actually. Great. I'm sure I should be able to see my screen soon. Are you able? You can see my screen now, right? Wonderful. So mostly you'll be keeping track on those indicators that are very easy to measure if you do not have much resource. But if you are such a big institution, or not necessarily a big institution, but you also want just to have a fully monitoring and evaluation system, then it means, will be integrated in the monitoring and evaluation system. There's going to be a part who just be focused on surveillance and research. There's going to be a part who just be focusing on monitoring activities. There's going to be a component which is going just to specifically focus on evaluation activities, and there will be a part which will completely focus on just sourcing for money specifically for monitoring and evaluation. So an indicator is something that you should be able to measure, and it should be able to inform you, and you should be able to make decisions basis of the indicators. To your funders, you are going to report to them about the overall indicator, then they will make a choice whether to continue funding your project or to cancel the funding. So that's all about the indicator, and I'm sure we all attended the class when I was talking about the indicators in class, but I just want to give you an overview. So when you look at this diagram here, it's more like a logic model which we discussed yesterday. You've got inputs, activities, output, outcome, and impact. So it means you can develop indicators starting from the inputs all the way up to the impact. There is no problem. However, for the outcome and impact, for these, there are certain indicators where you may need to do your own survey. If you do not have the capacity, then you would rather just end at the output level instead of complicating things that you cannot even measure on your own. Then it means you can just develop indicators up to output. all the indicators that you are going to have up to output level is something that you can measure, because you've got information from the monitoring side, you've been recording everything. So you just go through your documents, you count, and you'll be able to compute your indicator. Indicator pyramid is just what we looked at. Here, when you check here, the more you move away from the inputs and activities, the lesser control you have. In the same manner, the more or the further away you move from the inputs going to the impact, the lesser are the indicators you are going to have, because here you do not have control, and here the cumbersome it becomes for you to collect data. So the more cumbersome it becomes to collect data, the lesser the indicators that should develop. Otherwise, if you develop a lot of indicators, it will be quite difficult for you to collect data. And the more resources that you are going to invest in just for data collection to compute an indicator. So these are the characteristics for the good indicator. It must be varied. In other words, it must accurately measure what it is supposed to measure. If I can take you back to research, there's something that when you develop your questionnaire, people say that you need to test for validity. You need to know, is the question that I have in the questionnaire measuring my objectives? So that's validity. Even to the objectives, to the indicators, that also applies. We must measure the validity. The indicator should exactly measure what we want to capture. If we want to capture political violence, if I come up with an indicator which is political violence rate, I know that I'm going to accurately capture what political violence is and report on it. Someone wants to join. Let me just quickly give them access. Mr. Sulwe, you are welcome, sir. Then the indicator should be reliable, in the sense that if someone measures the same indicator in Kabwe and me I measure the same indicator in Lusaka, and one person measures the same indicator in Isolwezi, despite the different culture and the other condition, at least the results should be similar. That's what this point, which is a reliable point, talks about. It must be precise. It must be precise in the sense that it should be clearly defined in operational terms. If you remember very well about the indicator reference sheet, you can remember what we said about the indicator reference sheet, where you in detail describe what the indicator is. So in research, there is a point where you have to do the conceptual definition and you also do your operational definition. Conceptual definition, it means that you are defining a term using another term. I gave an example in class to say an elderly person. Which term can we substitute, or which other word can we use that will mean the same as an elderly person? An elderly person, which other term can we use to mean the same as an elderly person, but we just use a different term? Exactly, you're almost there. An aged person. An aged person means someone who is old. That means an elderly person. So that's what it means when they say conceptually define this. It means they are just using another term, which will mean as exactly as the original term. An elderly person, here on the other end, will be an aged person. Now, an operational definition is now that thing that will make that will specifically define what an elderly person is, and that is that thing that is going to help you to measure the thing. So an elderly person, if we can try to define what an elderly person, we can say that an elderly person is someone who is aged 65 and above. You've seen that I've specifically defined what an elderly person is. That's what it means to say operationally defined. You now clearly define it in simplicity, and it becomes easier to be measured because you've defined it in simpler terms, unlike when you've defined conceptually, because you are just using another terminology which will mean the same as an elderly person. Here you just say an aged person, but operationally terms or definition, now you have to define Oh, people now, they are joining. Okay, great. Are we moving together, class? And have we understood what an operational definition is? Exactly. So when we say that an indicator should be precise, it means we have to clearly define what that indicator is so that it becomes very easy to measure. In fact, I'm talking about measure when actually we've got even the another characteristics which is measurable. So for every indicator that we are going to develop, it has to be quantifiable. In other words, it's supposed to be measured by the existing methods. If you can't measure that indicator, then just know that you did not develop an indicator properly. Then an indicator should be timely, provides a measurement time intervals. We must clearly specify in how many months are we going to be reporting on this indicator. So we must talk about the frequency. Then programmatically important, linked to an impact or achieving the objectives that are needed. There are times where someone will develop an indicator which is contrary to what they intended to achieve. For instance, you are talking about HIV prevalence, for instance. You want to reduce HIV prevalence. Then you've got an indicator which is talking about water. There are two different things. There's no linkage whatsoever between water and HIV prevalence. So you can't have an indicator which is talking about improved access to water, which is not linked to HIV prevalence or reduction in HIV prevalence, because those are two different things. So avoid having such indicators. Always ensure that the indicators that you have are those indicators that are speaking to the overall goal that you intended to achieve. So that's all about the characteristics of indicators. But what is going to motivate you to develop an indicator? It will depend on the availability of data, which I talked about yesterday. If information is there, then go for that objective. If you know that you are going to use that objective as an organization, then there is need for you to be reporting on that objective. If the stakeholders are also interested in that indicator, then go for it. Then if the donors are going to be using that indicator, then go for it. If those conditions are not met, then don't go for that particular indicator. However, I don't mean that for you to go for an indicator, data is supposed to be available, donors must be interested. No, it could be the donors are interested in that indicator. You as an organization, you are not interested in that indicator, but the donors want that indicator. Then it means you are going to include it in your framework so that you can be reporting to your funders about that particular indicator. Then availability of data is mandatory for all the indicators that you are going to develop. You must know that somewhere information will be found for us to measure indicator, or we are going to do our own research to correct information or data for us to be measured to measure an indicator. So I've got this flow chart with me. It came from our public service management division, which is PSMD. Someone came with this in class. There's somewhere where they have put measures, then they've got targets, then they've got strategies or initiatives. Then measures this refer to indicators. The first indicator is as follows: number of public service officers with performance contracts. So this is an indicator that they want to be reporting on. Oh, someone dropped. So I thought maybe they wanted to join. Number of public service officers with performance contracts. So this is an output indicator. So they want to be reporting on the number of officers who have signed performance contracts. We know that evaluation at an individual level, we call it performance appraisal. That's evaluation, because you would want to assess how the performance of someone has been in your department in the past quarter, for instance. So that's performance appraisal. So it means PSMD want to be tracking the number of public service officers with signed performance contracts. That's an indicator that they are going to be reporting on. Number two, number of shortlisted applicants undertaking public service pre-entry exams. This is an indicator they want to be reporting on this one. But this one is a percentage, so it means you are going to have the numerator and you are going to have the denominator. So you need to ask yourselves, where are we going to get the information for the numerator and where are we going to get the information for the denominator. Once you know that information will be found, then you can include that as your indicator. Then I've got a question here. I've got a question. Which one should I pick? Okay. Which one should I pick? Okay. Percentage staff performance. Percentage staff performance. Could this be an output indicator or an outcome indicator? Percentage of staff performance. Percentage of staff performance. Can this be an output or outcome indicator? That's an outcome. You are very much correct. Madam, you wanted to say something? Sorry? Exactly. So it's possible to have both ways, but what will determine is how you are going to be measuring the same staff performance. If you are going to be measuring it on a daily basis, then it's going to come under output because it's something at the end of the day. Maybe, for instance, you want to know, has someone completed the task? Has someone done this before the close of business? So you're measuring on a daily basis. It's something that you can assess at the end of the day. Then that's going to be an output. But if we are going to be measuring it after a period of time, say 6 months, we want now to aggregate the performance at the national level, then definitely that is going to be an outcome. Yes, this will become an outcome, exactly. And this is a percentage, so it means we need to have information for the numerator and we need to have the information for the denominator. Exactly, so that when we compute, then we can report and say 80%. Oh, someone wants to join. Someone wants to join here. Let me just give them access. Oh, they are dropping. So it means at the end of 6 months, you are going to compute and have it in percentages. For instance, you can say 20% out of the total population were performing very, very well. Then 60% moderate, then 20% very poor. Then you are going to target those that did not do very well in the first quarter. It means when you start implementation of your activities or whichever you're going to be doing it, the focus should be more on those that did not do well so that you can also improve their performance, since your target is to increase performance among the employees overall. So you must focus more on those. It means more resources will be spent on those people rather than spending resources on those that did exceptionally good. It means you are going to make a mistake. At the end of it, you will not include the people that are performing well because you are still targeting the same group. Are we together, class? Exactly. So indicator reference sheet. So this is where now you are going to describe your indicators in detail. So you are going to talk about basic information, descriptions, how you are going to be collecting data, how you are going to be analyzing data, how after how many months or after how many years are you going to be reporting on that indicator? When are you going to be reviewing reviewing that indicator? What are the data quality issues? As we are collecting data as well, there must be something to do with data quality. We know that data quality is very important. Otherwise, it's possible for you to collect data that is not of good quality. So it means even as you do your analysis is not going to be trustworthy. That's why data quality is very important. And at the moment in Zambia, we've seen that there's been increase in the appreciation of data quality. People now are realizing that making decisions that are sound or making decisions that are based on data, it's highly likely that your decision is going to succeed than just making a decision from without. So data now is very much important for all of us. Those that are in management, those are just in pure data, data should be able to speak to us and be able to come up with decisions. Performance data table. So this is how the indicator reference sheet looks like. It's quite detailed. And the reason why you must describe your indicator like this is to make it easy for someone who is going to have access to your document and be able to understand this indicator. Let's say maybe you resigned as a project manager. Someone is coming in to take over from you as a project manager. They should not struggle to understand what you had actually put in your M&E plan. So they should just go to the indicator reference sheet, read it through, then they should be able to understand and they'll be able to know what exactly that particular indicator measures. So here there is an example that we've been using all along in class. Indicator name, the indicator is contraceptive prevalence rate. So it means they want to be reporting, to be tracking and be reporting on this indicator after a period of time, which you are going to specify. Then there's a definition. This indicator has now been defined. Remember when we looked at the characteristics of the indicators, we talked about that the indicator should be precise. In other words, it should be clearly defined using operational terms, and the operational terms will make it easier for you to measure this indicator. So the operational term is what is being talked about here under the definition. So the definition I'll read: percentage of women of reproductive age 15 to 49 who are married or in union using or whose partner is using a modern method of family planning. That's a definition for contraceptive prevalence rate. Then unit of measure is talking about, are you going to measure this indicator as a percentage? Are you going to measure this indicator as a proportion? Are you going to measure this indicator as a ratio? Are you going to measure this indicator as a count? When I talk about count, what am I talking about exactly, class? When I talk about a count, it means, yes, sir. Exactly. We are talking about the absolute numbers where you just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people are using contraceptive. That's a count. Then a proportion is where you've got a numerator and a denominator. Are we together? Then once you do the computation, it will give you into proportion. And the proportion is out of 1. You can't have a proportion which is above 1. Then just know that there's something wrong in your computation. Then to your proportion, when you say multiply by 100, then it will go into percentages. Then, yes, sir. Okay. So let me quickly demonstrate this. I prefer using this thing. Let me increase even my font size so that you are able to see it. So we are talking about a proportion. So a proportion, it will be, there must be a numerator divided by the denominator. So there's a relationship between the numerator and the denominator. So the numerator in the proportion is part of the denominator itself. Are we together? Yes. Then for the ratio also you are going to have, a ratio is where you are also going to have the numerator and the denominator. But the numerator is not supposed to be the subset of the denominator. There must be no relationship whatsoever between the numerator and the denominator. That's a ratio. So let me do this. Let me use an example of political. We said how did we term our, it was a political violence rate, right? That's what we said in class, political violence rate. So let's assume that this is an indicator that we want to measure. Let me just increase the font a little bit. Let me reduce the font to 20. Okay. Are we together? Okay, let me just do something. Oh, I want to insert this. Okay. So on top here, what are we going to have? So on top we are going to have the numerator, which is in this case we are going to say political violence cases, right? Political violence cases. Then what are we going to have as a denominator? What are we going to have as a denominator? What are we going to have as a denominator? Okay. So you see now my indicator is going to look like. So political violence indicator, for me to measure, it means the numerator is going to be the political violence cases. Then at the bottom is violence cases. As you can see, violence cases, it means even the political violence cases can also be part of the violence cases. Do we agree, class? Exactly. So I'll copy this, I'll paste this there, then I'll say equals, then I'll go on insert, then I'll go on equation here, then okay, what do I want to pick? Okay, I want to pick my equations. Okay, so I want to pick this equation here, so I've got here. So let's say we are reporting retrospectively, right? So we say maybe in the year 2018, 500 cases of political violence were recorded. Then let's say 1,000 violence cases were recorded. So it means even the same 500 which is on top is also included in the 1,000 there. Then I want now to have the actual value, which is there now, is going to be equals 500 divided by 1,000 is going to give us what? Sorry? 0.5, right? Exactly. So this is a proportion. So I said the proportion is supposed to be out of 1. Once you compute a proportion, I mean a proportion which is above 1, then just know that there's something wrong. So how can you interpret this value? The proportion is out of 1. So it means half of those violence cases that were recorded in 2018 were political or were politically inclined cases. That's why, because 0.5 here is half of a 1. So now when we talk about a percentage, it means we are just now saying we are going to multiply by a proportion multiplied by 100%. So if I multiply by this value by 100%, it will be 50%. And that should be very easy now for us to interpret. Can I have someone now to interpret here? So I've got a 50% here. So the political violence rate was 50%. Can I have someone to interpret this value for me? I've got 7 more people connected here, and I can only hear 2 people communicating with me. Madam Rachel Banda, please go ahead and interpret for us this value. Okay. No, not the ratio, not the ratio. We are looking at this value here, the rate. So we are computing. Yes. So we want to hear from you, madam. Mr. Sampson, Mr. Chisha, please speak to us. Exactly. And the rate, and when we talk about a rate, suppose, oh, You can proceed. So you are looking at the year 2010, because for it to be a rate, it must refer to a specific period in time. If there is no time, then it can't be a rate. So that's why I used an example of 2018. So, Madam Venz, you can interpret for us this value. Actually, I did just interpret about 5 minutes ago. I interpreted the same number, but I did interpret when we had the 0.5. Because once we've added the percentage, it becomes very easy for us to interpret. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm. 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 Exactly. We are assuming that we are looking at Zambia in general. We are measuring political violence. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Exactly. Exactly. Suppressed. Okay. Okay. That sounds great. That sounds great. Yeah. Exactly. Wonderful. Wonderful. That's a good feedback. So this one that I've highlighted here. So this is a percentage because I've multiplied by, I mean, I'm doing a multiplication of the 0.5 with 100%, then it becomes a percentage. Then immediately I remove a percentage here, then it's going to remain completely a ratio. Then I know that some people might have challenges to report on a ratio, so you can convert it into percentages. So in the year 2018, 50% of the violence cases were politically inclined. So I'm reporting on this indicator. In other words, political violence rate stood at 50%. So let's say if our baseline was 40%, then our goal was to reduce political violence. Now, after 6 months of implementation, we've computed the value now is 50%. Then it means political violence has increased by 10%, isn't it? Exactly. So, since it has increased by 10%, then you must ask yourself, where are we doing it wrong as a project? Where are we doing it wrong as a program? Because it is increasing. Your goal is to reduce it, but now it's on the higher side. So, you must come up with new strategies to ensure that you you curb this issue of political violence. So that's why it's quite important for us to be reporting on the indicators, because you want to be knowing after maybe say 6 months to know the status of each indicator, so that when we know that it's on the higher side, if our goal is to reduce it, then we must come up with new strategies and initiatives. We don't want to come and report on that indicator after 5 years when we finished the project. We want to make a collection now before tomorrow comes. That's the whole essence of having monitoring and evaluation, is to make a correction and do it better tomorrow, rather than keeping that error. Then we keep on making the same error. So it means that at the end we may not achieve our objectives. Then you may also have qualitative indicators which cannot be quantifiable. You can measure them qualitatively. For instance, when you're talking about when you talk of improvement in the health of people, it may be difficult for you to measure quantitatively in numerical. You can just look at the quality of health. So you start looking at the services that are being offered to the people at a clinic level. Then from there you can say that indeed this has led to the improvement in the health of the people in Vubu district. So it's possible to have qualitative and quantitative indicators. So it's up to you to decide. Do I have to go for quantitative? Quantitative then means it's supposed to be measured in numbers like this one. So Mr. Linan, have I demonstrated? You asked me to demonstrate. Is this now clear enough? Wonderful. Then when we talk of the ratio, an example, the best example would be teacher to pupil ratio. It's an indicator that you can be tracking and be reporting on that indicator. How is the teacher pupil ratio as of 2019? You measure it, you say now that one teacher, 50 pupils. Then maybe it could be your goal as a project is to ensure that only 20 pupils are being attended to by one teacher. So as of 2019, our indicator is telling us that 50 pupils are being attended to by one person. Then we keep on doing the implementation. Then we come and report on the same indicator in 2020, where we are going to say 40 pupils are being attended to by one person. Then we know that we are making progress. Then over the years, we are going out to say, after collecting the data, maybe we report to say 15 pupils are being attended to by one person. Can we say that we've succeeded as a project? Definitely, we are going to say we have succeeded, because our goal was to reduce teacher pupil ratio to 1 per 20 pupils. But now we are on 1 to 15 pupils. So it means we had even gone past our targets. So you can clap for ourselves as a project that we've done it. So I can go back to my slide here. So unit of measure, just trying to show there. Then how to calculate, how are you going to calculate that indicator? Numerator you are going to put. So for this indicator, it's talking about the number of women aged 15 to 49 years who are married or in union, who are not pregnant or unsure. Denominator, you can just quickly read through this. It's very detailed and very simple to understand. You are just specifying, just like if I can come back to my example here. If I can come back to my example here. When you talk of political violence cases, so it means the numerator will be those cases that are politically attached. So you can classify what you are going to term as a political violence case. I gave a very funny example in class. What if I was to go into the central business district, then I'm beaten by the cadres? Are we going to say that's a political violence case or not? Let's assume that I'm not associated with any political party. I just go there, then I'm been beaten by cadres. Are we going to say that's a political violence case? But is it going to be a political violence case? It will just be a violence case in general, not a political violence. Because for me, I'm not associated to any political party, or I'm not carrying any political regalia that will say, no, this one belongs to this. I've just been beaten by cadres. So, in as much as those are cadres associated with certain political parties, but because of the person that I've beaten, who is not associated with any political party, we cannot assume that that's a political violence case. No, it can just be a violence case in general. So, in the same manner, so we can now define what a numerator is going to be. Then from there, important backgrounds. What more do you want to include on your indicator just to make it easier for someone? Like for this one, is talking about modern contraceptive pills. So this one now, someone now went further to say, to classify what a modern contraceptive pill, or I mean method, is. The following methods are usually counted as modern methods in an indicator. There's tube ligation, there is vasectomy, there is pills, there is IUD, there are injection implants, condoms, female condoms, diaphragm, foam, jelly, and lamp. So all these mentioned here are what are being called modern contraceptive pills. Whatever is not being mentioned here, then it's not part of the modern contraceptive pills. So you just want to add on few notes over your indicators. Then what it measures, what exactly does it measure? It measures the entire population coverage to the use of current family planning use. For our indicator, we can say it measures it measures the frequency of political violence in a population. Then data collection, very important. Where are you going to be collecting your data to measure an indicator? It's actually taking us back to the logical framework under the means of verification. You remember, right? I'm quite fast today because I know we've done these things before. Then frequency and timing. So if I just include something here on frequency and timing, you've seen there is a baseline. So every time I need to have a baseline. I need to have something to start with. Then after that, I'll now specify, am I going to be measuring this indicator after 2 years or after 1 year, after 6 months? Depending on the complication of the indicator would determine the frequency. If an indicator is very complicated, you cannot be reporting on it after 3 months. You'd rather report on it maybe after 3 years. But if an indicator is very easy to measure, then even after a month, because you've got information readily available from the monitoring and evaluation documents, then they must propose the data use. It's not just a matter of measuring an indicator. We must use it to make further decisions as a project, as an institution, as a government, as donors. Are we together, class? Any questions about the indicators before I can dive into? I'll just take about 10 or 15 minutes to explain what the data analysis is. Any questions about the indicators? Okay, so we can move into data analysis and interpretation, which you missed on Friday because you were not connected, for those of you that missed the Friday's class. So there are times where we want to write a detailed report, so it means we must analyze data, right? There must be some form of reporting. So there are two ways in. So I'll measure on the qualitative side. On the quantitative side, I know maybe most of you might even know how to use like these two here. The SPSS one, it's very easy for you to do your regressions. If you wanted to do your regression, your linear regression, then you're going to have your independent variable, which is going to be maternal age dependent variable. Then you move on, you even set this one at 95% significance level. It's up to you to decide. And you are going to have your results there. Then you interpret, but I just want now to measure on the qualitative side. Remember that for qualitative side, that's where now you are going to be, people are going to be narrating. Let's say it's about service delivery. How is the service delivery about family planning in Vubu district? The expectation is that someone is going to to give out a narration. That narration might capture the entire page, or might even be 10 pages, for instance. But the question is, how can you go about analyzing such kind of information? Are we following class? Where you're not clear, please pause me and ask questions, because I know that this part, I decided to include this part because it's rarely taught, data analysis, because monitoring and evaluation without you doing data analysis is incomplete, especially if you want to write a detailed report, more especially at the end of the project. So I'll give a basic example here. Let's say maybe the question was, what row should, let me maintain the same example that I used in class. Like at the University of Zambia, there are students associations. There are student associations, for instance. So maybe let's say one of the evaluation question was that what row or rows should students associations play in the fight against HIV/AIDS, like this. Okay. What role should students play in the fight against HIV/AIDS? That's a question. So let's say we've got questions like sensitization, we've got awareness campaigns, taking responsibility, psychosocial, just like psychosocial counseling, for instance. Let's say there is preaching, zero sexual intercourse, then abstinence, for instance. Okay, abstinence. Great. So let's take this as examples, class. Are we following? Yes. Great. Now I've just shortened these responses. Remember that someone can go on and go on just to explain what sensitization can do. So the first form of analysis is what we call thematic analysis. The first form of analysis is what is called thematic analysis. Thematic analysis should be something like this. I don't know. Okay, thematic analysis is where you group responses based on similarities. Are we together, class? You group your answers that you have based on similarities. So we can start. Let me copy this and paste this in Excel so that it becomes easier for us when we put it in Excel. And of course, me, I'm using Excel 365. So if you are using, Madam Venz, if you are using 2003, you should upgrade. So I'm in Excel here so that it looks good. Great. So there I am. Let me just increase my font a little bit. Okay, great. So we can start. So we said thematic analysis is where we group something based on similarities. So here when we look at sensitization is also similar to awareness, right? Yeah. Then it's also similar to preaching zero sexual intercourse. It means they are doing sensitization, right? Exactly. So we can decide that, okay, for anything that is talking about awareness, preaching zero sexual intercourse, sensitization, we are just going to call this category as what? As sensitization. Are we together, class? Yes. So I'll start counting. How many people talked about sensitization? Let's say 2 talked about sensitization. So I'll put 2 here. Are we together? Then I move on. Is sensitization similar to awareness? Yes. How many people talked about awareness? Let's say 6 talked about awareness. I'll put 6 there. Are we following? Then we know that preaching zero sexual intercourse, this is sensitization. How many talked about this one? Then what's the total here? 9, right? Exactly. So it means 9 people talked about sensitization in general. I'm just grouping these things based on similarities. Are we together? Exactly. So this happens if I want to convert the same qualitative information that I have and the report as percentages or as numbers. Have you seen that? It is now going back to numbers here. I can say that 9 people talked about sensitization. So it's also possible that from the same answer where people have been giving you as narrations, 1 page, 2 pages, you can convert it and report it into numbers. You do that by following this concept, which is thematic analysis. You narrow down your responses to specific answers like sensitization. Then you are just going to put all those things that you consider to be falling under sensitization. You just put them under sensitization. Then I'll move on here, taking responsibility. So I can just say responsibility in general, responsibility. So I'll start looking at the variables that I have here. Do I have a variable which is similar to responsibility? Do I have, among the responses that I've gotten, do I have anything similar to responsibility? Abstinence is responsibility, right? Exactly. So which word should we use as our key group? Responsibility or abstinence? Abstinence sounds more technical, right? Which is good. So we count how many people talked about abstinence. Let's say 1. How many people talked about taking responsibility? 3. So it means we are going to have 4 people there. Then we go to psychosocial counseling. So let's assume that only 1 person talked about psychosocial counseling, right? So I'm going to group it on its own, psychosocial counseling. So this is now done. Have I left out something? So here I can just find my total there, some. Then I'll just find my total there. Then it means I've got 14 respondents. Are we together? So now, this is a frequency. This is a frequency, right? Because these are absolute numbers. I'm too quick. Exactly. Then I want to come up with percentages here. You see that it's also possible to come up with percentages now, right? How can we do that? Who can tell us? Madam Rachel, you can now tell us. Times 100, right? Exactly. So Excel makes things easier. So I'll just put my 100% there. Then I'm gonna say equals 9 divided by this, multiplied by my 100% there. Oh God, it's giving me, let me just use 100. Let me not use the percentage. So it has given me the value there. Have you seen, right? Then I'll just lock these so that they become, sorry. Exactly, yeah, okay. Let me do this. I've done something wrong to my formula. Okay. So if I drag this down, it will not give me the values, but I just want to lock my formulas. So I'll put a $sign here and I'll lock this. So what I'm doing, I want to make the 14 for the 14 here to be consistent. It means for every number should be divided by 14. Then I also go there and lock the 100 there. So it means for every calculation, it should also be multiplied by that value which is here. Let me just, it's supposed to be 100 there, not 1000. Like that. Then I'll just drag this formula down there. You've seen that it has populated for me the values there. Then I'll just reduce this. Then if I want to confirm, I can just say summation of these things here. That's the 100%. Are we together, class? So it becomes very easy here. Let me just say 64.3, 28.6, 7.1. So let's say I wanted to make a pie chart. I can just hide this. Then I'll just select these things and go here and come up with a pie chart. Have you seen that this is a pie chart here? And there it goes. So it means I can now take this pie chart in my Word for reporting purposes. It becomes very easy. So if I want, I can include both the frequency and the percentage and come up with a bar chart. And that is gonna be my bar chart there. Then I'll just add on the labels. Then I'll add on the percentages. It becomes very easy now for you to do reporting. Or if you want, you can come up with a very simple table. You can come up with a very simple table like this. Then you're gonna do like this. You go here, you put this. Then you're gonna have your total here. Then you're going to do it like this. Then I'll put this in my Word document. I'll paste this. Then I can always okay, let me do this. Okay, great. I can just increase these things. And there it's done. You've seen that I would prefer to come up with this table here, or I come up with a pie chart, or I come up with anything that I want to come up with. Are we together, class? Are we following? Exactly. So this form of analysis is what we call thematic analysis. We are just grouping responses based on similarities. Another form of analysis is what is called verbatim. Before I can go on to explain what verbatim is, can I have someone to give it a try, to try to say something about verbatim? Yes. Okay, exactly. So it means I can do a reported speech, right? Because remember, people are narrating that no, the service was pathetic, the way they were giving, the way they were distributing condoms, this and this and this and this and this. So we would want to bring the same statement in the analysis. We would want to quote someone exactly what I said. That's what verbatim is. What I was trying to show you is that it's possible that from the narration, you can convert them and come up with numbers, like what we did here. We just grouped these responses based on similarities. These are the responses that we got. But remember, I just shortened these responses so that I don't have an overload of typing things. Remember, you are going to have someone explaining, for instance, that sensitization can be a tool that can be used to curb the issue of HIV at the University of Zambia. When people are taught, then it means there will be knowledge gain. Once they gain knowledge, there will be attitude change. Once there's attitude change, it means they are going to take preventive measures at a personal level. Imagine that you got such a response. When you look at that response, entirely they're talking about sensitization. So it will still come back to this sensitization. So we just want to report something into quantitative format of it. So that's why now grouping basis of the similarities. Now verbatim is also very, very important to us. Now something that I would like to mention is that it's possible for you to combine both verbatim and the thematic analysis. Thematic analysis will just help you to come up with graphs like we did here. When I go back to my Excel here, I can come up with a graph for this one. I can come up with a graph for this one. You've seen? Or I can come up with a table like this one. So when I combine both, it means I'll start by doing the interpretation of this table, where I can say that nearly 2/3. We know 2/3. 2/3 is 3 over 5. 2 over 3 multiplied by 100, which is going to give you 60%. So I'm saying nearly 2/3, which is 64.3% field sensitization. Like that, you can proceed with the analysis. Now, let me now go to the verbatim and explain what verbatim is all about. Verbatim. Any question on the thematic analysis? Is very easy, right? Or have I confused you? Hello? Should I proceed? Great. So now, verbatim here, that's when our thinking comes in. Here you need to think in details. So you can imagine that we have questionnaires. Then the question was, what role should the students play in the fight against HIV/AIDS? The expectation is that people are going to be giving us their opinions. So it means they are going to be narrating. Let's assume that one response is covering the entire page. How do we go about analyzing such kind of questions? In the same manner, the way we did the same thematic analysis, I would start perusing through my questionnaires. If my memory is not good enough, then I can be recording in my book or in my diary. I'll start looking at my responses. Once I peruse all the 500 questionnaires, from deep down my mind, I can be able to say, quite a lot of respondents talked about sensitization. Are we following? Quite a lot talked about sensitization. Then a few talked about the psychosocial counseling. Then I'll start now analyzing without coming up with graphs. Then now what's key during verbatim is that you yourself, as a person who is analyzing the data, must come up with an opening statement. If, for instance, I want to talk about sensitization, I'm going to start with my own opening statement. For instance, that from the evaluation conducted at the University of Zambia, between February 2019 to 15th to September 2019, many students indicated that sensitization can be a good tool that can be used to fight the prevalence of HIV, AIDS, HIV/AIDS on campus. Are we following, class? Exactly. You can't see anything. Okay. So I've started with an opening statement myself as a researcher, and you've seen in this statement I've singled out sensitization. I used this word, which is men of students, because when I perused through my questionnaires, from deep down my mind, or from deep down my mind, or from my head, I can tell that actually quite a lot of students talked about sensitization. That's the reason why I've used this word. Many of the students indicated that sensitization can be a good tool, that can be used to fight the prevalence of HIV/AIDS on campus. Are we together, class? Now, this response or this opening statement is not coming from without. It's coming from the responses that I've checked in my questionnaires. Now, for me to validate this statement, I have to quote a respondent who talked about sensitization. So, Madam Venzo, give us a response that I'm going to type here. Assume that you are now the one responding. What role should students play in the fight against HIV/AIDS? Now, you can give me the response that I should type here, which should be specifically talking about sensitization, so that I quote you. I'm waiting, Madam Venzo. I can hear you. Or Madam Rachel wants to help. Please, you can proceed. Okay. So I'm presuming that this is a response that one of the respondents gave. Are we together, class? Hello, please confirm you can hear me. Exactly. Now, for me to differentiate this from my own statement, and remember that this is a direct quotation. So, what am I going to do to this? Since it's a reported speech, what should I do? Exactly, I have to put this in inverted commas. So this will show that this is a direct quotation. I'm writing exactly what someone wrote in the questionnaire. The only thing that I can do to that particular response is just to put in connectors, just to make the complete sentence. Are we together? We don't have to change anything. Just put in connectors so that you make it to become a full sentence. Then now to differentiate it, I have now to put this response in italics. Have you seen that this response is now in italics, right? Let me just read my table on top here so that we becomes very visible. Let me just also reduce my font a little bit. I can put this at 16. I'm sure we can see, right? Exactly. So this is my opening statement. From the evaluation conducted at the University of Zambia between February 2019 to September 2019, men of the students indicated that sensitization can be a good tool that can be used to fight the prevalence of HIV/AIDS on campus. What do I do to validate my statement? I'm quoting one of the students who talked about sensitization. In inverted commas, conducting sensitization activities within campus about HIV will increase students' knowledge about it. Once they are knowledgeable, they can take personal precaution measures. Full stop. Are we together, class? This is now verbatim. So now, I have now to put in the identity of the person who gave me this response. Are we together? So I want to put here. But now remember, every time when we are doing an evaluation, we are doing research. There's what we call ethical consideration, where you assure people that I'm not going to use your individual names to report. I'm going to uphold maximum confidentiality and the privacy of the information that you are going to give me. So now, let's say Bright Nkoma is a student from the University of Zambia and he gave this response. What am I going to put here to show that Bright Nkoma gave this response? Of course, you are not going to say Bright Nkoma. So in this case, I can just say student, or let me say fourth year student, Unza. Then this is supposed to be, I have to put this in brackets, and this is supposed to be in bold, and this is supposed to be on my right side. There you go. It means you've done the verbatim analysis here. Are we together? Classes? Yes. Exactly. So this is how we go about doing the verbatim analysis. So here I've just talked about sensitization. So it means I can even quote another person who talked about sensitization. I can even quote about at least 3. And the responses that we go for those brilliant responses. If, for instance, someone just said sensitization, then someone has given you a response like this one, what do you go for? You go for that brilliant response. Then here I've just talked about specifically sensitization. Then I'll proceed. Let me say, let's assume that I want to talk about psychosocial counseling. I can proceed. I will start with an opening statement. In as much as sensitization is important in reducing HIV/AIDS on campus, conducting psychosocial counseling is something that can also help eradicate HIV, whatever. It's just a statement that I'm making. So I'll talk about psychosocial counseling. If I've got few details that I would want to add, I'll add. Then I'm going to do the direct quotation like I've done here. Then that's it. You don't have to show graphs. And I'm sure you've seen reports where the analysis has been done like this, isn't it? Especially for evaluation. Because evaluation, you'll be dealing with the questionnaire guide only. You are going to be having an interview guide, unlike a questionnaire. An interview guide is where you just have got a few questions that will be guiding your interview. To be a conversation. So, sir, how do you look at this service? Someone will explain. So, basis of your answer, what could be your recommendation? So it's different from a questionnaire. A questionnaire, you're going to have the questions that are prescribed, then sometimes there could be answers attached there. So it means the person will just be ticking on the answer on the category that applies to them. So now, just to conclude, there are times when the reason why we need to report like this, we want to hide the identity of the person. There are times when we are dealing with sensitive issues. Then someone maybe gave out a response. We want to protect those people from the public because they can be attacked. Let's say someone gave out unwelcome response on political things issues. If the identity of that person is known, it's easily that person can be traced and that person can be beaten by cadres. So we want to hide the identity of that person. However, there are instances where you are dealing with a topic that can inspire someone by virtue of someone reading and knowing the person who gave out that response. They will be inspired. So maybe it could be World Bank, maybe let's say the director from World Bank is encouraging that we should reduce early marriages. In that case, because that matter is not very sensitive, and we know that if someone is going to read that response, they are going to be inspired that, wow, it's the World Bank director who gave me this response, who gave this response. Let's try it. In that circumstance, then you can quote the name of the person. Venzu, whatever, World Bank director. That's still fine because that issue is not sensitive because it will inspire someone. So this makes it the end of this class. I'll invite questions before we call it a night. So let me just close my video here.